good afternoon to you all. This is Midday Express with Kurhula Mkansi, giving you the latest news update during your lunch hour. And now heading to the first story this afternoon, the hunt is on for several young crocodiles that escaped from a breeding farm in the Western Cape province of South Africa, authorities said on Thursday after capturing 26 on overnight patrols. An unknown number of Nile crocodiles, widespread in Africa, escaped from a Bonneville commercial breeding farm into the Bree River on Wednesday, sparking a hunt involving police, landowners, and conservation officials. The escaped crocodiles, with a reputation as man-eaters, are 1.2 and 1.5 meters in length, authorities said. Petro van Rijn, a spokesperson for Cape Nature Conservation Agency, said so far they have captured 26 and now cannot confirm how many are still on the loose. Bred mainly for the leather products, the freshwater crocodiles can grow to an average length of 5 meters, with adult males weighing more than half a ton.
Hello. Large number of young crocodiles escaped from a breeding farm in South Africa. Cape Town officials have urged the public to be on the lookout after a large number of young crocodiles escaped from the commercial breeding farm in Bonneville. 20 of the young Nile crocodiles were recaptured following operations by Cape Nature, the landowners in the area, the owner of the crocodile breeding farm, and the South African Police Service. However, an unknown number remained at large and had in all likelihood found their way to the Bree River, which runs in the vicinity. The community of Bonneville and surrounding areas have been urged to avoid the Bree River for a few days and to keep an eye out for the escaped reptiles. The crocodiles vary in size from 1.2 meter to 1.5 meter and present medium danger to people because they are farmed animals, used to regular feeding and therefore did not hunt for their food, said James Brandstein, a spokesperson for Western Cape Environmental MEC Anton Breeder. An area about 5 km upstream towards Robertson and 5 km downstream towards Swellendam is the key area. Cape Nature and their partners will continue to search for the animals and have set a number of human traps with the bait to recapture the animal. Patrol on the river will be undertaken every night to catch these animals, he said. Thanks.
Professor Abdul Karim was amongst those that were receiving the COVID-19 vaccine today at the St. Augustine's Hospital, where he learned medicine.
It was particularly poignant that I would be receiving my vaccine at the place I learned most about how this virus spreads, and that's at St. Augustine's Hospital. Very early on in this epidemic, I was asked by the Director General, could I please go to St. Augustine's urgently? There's an outbreak there. And so I went across, and what transpired was 3 days of really understanding what is going on, who patient zero was, how did the virus get from patient zero to the next patient, how did it get to the ICU, how did it get to the ward. I had to unravel the details of an epidemic.
He further discussed how he came to be the co-chair of the Ministerial Advisory Committee on COVID-19 as advised by Dr. Zweli Mkhize.
Set up chair. It didn't really need to ask me because I was always going to say yes. I consider this my duty. I was going to do it. But I think for me, it brought home and the realization that we really need to know a lot more about this virus, and that it became clear to me that the minister was doing something that I hadn't really thought about in the same way. That if we are going into this kind of battle, he needed science. He needed to have the knowledge, the information, the evidence to help that process. And he set this up to be able to get that. And I was honored to have been asked to play this role. And of course, shortly thereafter comes the St. Augustine's outbreak, which I've already touched on.
He ended his speech by saying that they need to work together to see the end of COVID-19.
That it's going to lie in our ability to work together, to understand that in solving this epidemic and solving this pandemic, we cannot do so if we work in isolation. We've got to work together. And I'd like to end off by quoting Pope Francis in this editorial he published in the New York Times. And I quote, "The pandemic has exposed the paradox that while we are more connected, we are also more divided. To come out of this crisis better, we have to recover the knowledge that as a people, we have a shared destination. The pandemic has reminded us that no one is saved alone. What ties us to one another is what we commonly call solidarity. Solidarity is more than acts of generosity, as important as they are. It is the call to embrace the reality that we are bound by the bonds of reciprocity." And Mandela said it better than anyone of us when he captured for us the spirit of Ubuntu. I am safe because you are safe. You are safe because I am safe. We are interdependent. And we cannot defeat this epidemic if we don't acknowledge our independence and acknowledge that we have to do so in solidarity. Thank you very much.
The Health Department has reported 1,447 new cases of coronavirus, taking the number of total infections to 1,516,262 on Wednesday. There have been a further 95 COVID-19 related deaths in the country, bringing the national toll to 50,366. Recoveries now stand at 1,434,772, representing a recovery rate of 94.6%. The number of vaccines that have been administered to health workers now stand at 83,570. And moving on to our next story, Wise for Africa, a women-led initiative that seeks to disrupt patriarchy by advancing women-inspired solutions for empowerment. Today, they held a protest at the Sunday World offices for what they believe is the conflict behavior in the abuse of women. We call on the immediate resignation of Malaji and an apology from the paper.
Of this country are determined to see an end to gender-based violence, which the National Strategic Plan on GBVF has adopted in the country, calls for every South African to play their role in preventing and addressing the scourge. We are further aware of the prevalent rape culture that burdens and victimizes survivors while failing to demand accountability from those charged with perpetrating such violence, thus enabling the impunity. We are therefore appalled that Sunday World is among those who perpetuate rape culture through reporting that is abusive to survivors, undermines existing laws, and enables.
They also handed over a memorandum to Wally Mbele, the editor of Sunday World. And now moving on to the next story, Transport Minister Fikile MBALULA says they continue to condemn the vandalism of public property. MBALULA says people should not view these acts as a way of expressing anger by those who commit such, stating that no anger drives people to vandalize the public property. He says PRASA has been a victim of cable theft as criminals smuggle copper cables to other countries and also in black markets.
Act, and it must be understood as such. To color code it and talk nice about it, anger of people, there's no anger that lead to vandalism of public property. The people who vandalize, they vandalize with the sole purpose of stealing and taking that to markets, underworld, to sell. Like in our case, copper cables, it's big. And with the shutdown at level 5, you have seen the vandalism of train stations across. So it's a criminal act. We have established that there are laboratories in the country that are operating. They melt the copper cable, they export it via Mozambique to East Asia. Loads and lots of money, just like Mendrax and drugs laboratories and all of that. It's a syndicate that operate working hand in hand with backyard mechanics and all of that. That's where PRASA, Property, and Transnet end up, in the backyard laboratories in the townships and all of that. Mostly operated even by people who are foreigners in our country, who are basically executing. They work with people inside. It's an inside job. Some of the people who lead them to this vandalism and stealing of property, they are working.
Students coming from different provinces to study in Johannesburg are said to be struggling to find accommodation near their institution of choice. This came out as Action SA, led by Herman Mashaba, visited students and proposed that new residential areas be built for students. One of the students said the situation is difficult for her schoolmates as they are forced to stay far from school due to unavailability of accommodation nearby. She says it is important for the government to consider building more residential structures for students.
As a student of Johannesburg and at Wits University, I find that a lot of my peers struggle to find sustainable and good accommodation in the area, viable for them to be able to actually get to the university and study. A lot of my peers, especially those from the rural areas, struggle, and we need to work together for the sake of the students and the youth of the country to build these accommodations and accommodate for everyone, many class.
Thank you very much.
On the other hand, Herman Mashaba says they will take the city of Johannesburg to account for failure to manage properly the buildings within the city.
Now we are at 79 Volbaran Street in the city of Johannesburg. The building behind us is one of the 154 buildings awarded to the private sector for development. As you can see for yourself, nothing has happened today. We are going to be taking the city of Johannesburg to account for this.
For hashtag Fees Must Fall earlier today, VETS SRC Deputy President Thembiso Dabula addressed students gathered at the main campus in Braamfontein in a call for all holds to be cleared against students with historical debt.
Right, so can I start now?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so one of the challenges that the students of this city have been facing is the lack of student accommodation, and part of the plan that President Herman Mashaba had as the mayor of the city of Johannesburg was to make sure that part of those buildings that were meant for the for revamping were going to be given to private individuals, private business, to turn them into low-cost student accommodations. And it's still a challenge now because as you can see here, there hasn't been anything that's done. The city has absolutely just put this plan aside, and there's nothing that's happening, and students are still continuing to have a tremendous lack of student accommodation. So it's a challenge that really is not a rational challenge. Really, it's hard to understand why would a government let go of a 32 billion rand project, and a project that promised to create about 21,000 jobs in a city that's struggling to create jobs. This was a project that was promising quite a lot from the people of the city of Johannesburg and the students. And the students are very disappointed in the council that we have now and the mayor that we have now, because there hasn't been anything that has been done to take this program forward. So it's quite disappointing to see what's happening in the city.
Speaking outside the library, VET SRC Treasurer General Kanakana Mudzanani says they remain resolute on addressing injustices, including inaccessibility.
Viva! Viva KZN! Viva! Viva! Viva Limpopo! Viva! Viva! Malibongwe! Comrades, all of you here are a symbol of hope where you come from. Even the ones that are yet to register are a symbol of hope where they come from. Yes. Some of them, they are first in their tribe to come to a university space. But tomorrow there will be the same ones who are going to be financially excluded. Yes. On the basis that they don't have money to pay. This is a brutal system, and we need to attend it with the rigor it deserves. Yes, if you are going to keep quiet today, it means you're going to keep quiet forever. Yes. In 2015, in 2016, they called for fees must fall, but yet we are still victims to the same system. The only thing we need to do as a way forward is to sit here for 30 minutes to ensure that nothing is going to proceed. After that, we go to Senate House to show Zebulon Vilakazi that we are not scared of him. Yes. He's a puppet. Yesterday he called. Yes, yesterday he said that he won't invest to a failing company. Are students failing companies? Are students failing companies? Even companies were failing during COVID. Government subsidizes them. Yes. But why are they silent and not subsidizing students?
And now moving on to some sports news. Kaizer Chiefs goalkeeper Itumeleng Khune is under the spotlight once again. This is after a video of him out partying surfaced on social media. The timing of his night out is what got Twitter buzzing, given the challenges currently faced Amakosi. And now moving on to the next story. Senegal's main opposition leader, Ousmane Sonko, was arrested on Wednesday after hundreds of his supporters clashed with police in the capital while protesting a rape accusation against him. A saloon worker last month laid charges against Sonko, said, and last week he was removed from parliament following his arrest. Sonko said the allegations were not true, and he further cited that there is a political smear jotted all over the recent incidents.
Senegal's main opposition leader was arrested on Wednesday after hundreds of his supporters clashed with police while protesting a rape accusation against him. An employee at a beauty salon accused Ousmane Sonko of rape last month. He was summoned for questioning after his parliamentary immunity was removed last week. Former tax inspector Sonko, who enjoys significant support among younger Senegalese, has denied the allegation. He accuses President Macky Sall's government of stirring up the charge to undermine his strongest rival.
What is going on is nothing more than a project to wipe out our democracy. Every time a dictatorship has been allowed to settle and prosper, it is because an overwhelming majority of the people abdicated before a tiny minority, which played on their fears. Nothing can resist the will and courage of people.
Sonko's supporters burned tyres and threw rocks at riot police near his house, who responded with tear gas. A Reuters reporter saw 2 injured protesters, one of whom was bleeding from the head. Sonko's lawyer also said he was accused of disturbing public order and participating in a banned demonstration. The police were not immediately available for comment. Other top rivals of Sall have been targeted by criminal charges in the past, but he denies there has been any political interference in those cases.
COVID-19 has accelerated the global demand for medical oxygen and made the delivery of oxygen supplies more urgent. In Hargeisa General Hospital in Somaliland, oxygen concentrators donated by WHO are making differences. Health Department in the country said these concentrators will not only help COVID-19 related complications, but will also make a difference even after the pandemic for patients suffering from pneumonia and other respiratory-related diseases.
The COVID pandemic has accelerated the world's demand for medical oxygen and made the delivery of supplies that much more urgent. But at Hargeisa General Hospital in Somaliland, oxygen concentrators donated by the World Health Organization are making a huge difference. Dr. Hamda Mahmoudin says they've not only helped with the treatment of coronavirus patients, but those with other respiratory illnesses too.
The current availability of oxygen concentrators, for example, in our center, it will help more even if after the COVID-19 pandemic ends. So it will help every child with pneumonia, it will help every adult with pneumonia, it will help every adult or child with any respiratory illnesses that requires oxygen supply.
It's estimated that more than 500,000 people in low and middle income countries currently need 1.1 million cylinders of oxygen per day. 25 countries have reported surges in demand, though, the majority in Africa. Supplies were already tight prior to COVID-19 and have been further exacerbated by the pandemic. But as of February, the WHO and its partners have distributed over 30,000 concentrators, 40,000 pulse oximeters, and patient monitors, reaching 121 countries, 37 of which are classified as fragile. Dr. Mahmoudin says the oxygen concentrators are especially valuable to Hargeisa, as they don't need to be filled like cylinders and only require electricity to function properly.
Thousands of Central African Republic refugees are living in makeshift shelters and struggling to care for their families in hard-to-reach areas close to the border in the Democratic Republic of Congo. These refugees are said to have fled from the Democratic Republic of Congo following unrest within the country. They have no access to food and sanitation.
Thousands of Central African Republic refugees at this hard-to-reach camp in the Democratic Republic of Congo are sleeping out in the open in makeshift shelters. They have little or no access to sanitation, drinking water and food. Authorities in the DRC estimate that there are 92,000 Central African refugees there after election-linked violence erupted in December last year. Some have been welcomed by host families. Reports indicate that up to 3 refugee families are living in a single small home in the remote border areas. Waki Paul is one refugee enduring the dire conditions.
When we arrived, our living conditions were difficult. Finding food was difficult. We couldn't go back there because night and day there was the sound of gunfire. It's not possible to go back there because if you go back there and things happen again and it finds you there, what will you say? We'll endure here until God touches someone's heart to help us.
The UN Refugee Agency, or UNHCR, is trying to establish the number of new arrivals and to identify those with specific needs or vulnerabilities. It's working to relocate refugees to safer sites where they can receive better humanitarian assistance and protection. Nearly a third of the Central African Republic's population of 4.7 million have been forced to flee after years of on-off conflict. The gold and diamond-rich country has failed to find stability since a 2013 rebellion. The UN says nearly half of the national territory is occupied by armed groups.
And that was all that I've had for you today on Midday Express, giving you the latest news update during your lunch hour. From me and Galaxy Universal Network, we say until next time.